Welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. On this session, we're going to be talking about opportunities to create impacts across Facebook this holiday season. My name is Megan Conahan. I'm an EVP at Direct Agents, and I'm joined by Facebook's Miranda Lee. Miranda, welcome. Would you mind giving a quick intro on yourself?
Of course, thank you so much for having me. I'm Miranda Lee. I'm the account manager on the retail team, and I drive all of our holiday messaging for the past 3 years. Really excited to chat with you guys today on holiday and bring a couple new insights to the table.
Awesome. Before we get started, I did want to say if you do have any questions as we go through, please feel free to submit them, and we're going to do our best to answer them at the end. So to kick it off, Miranda has actually prepared a couple of some of the consumer trends that have been changing that Facebook's been tracking for Q4. So Miranda, would you mind kind of walking us through those, and then we'll kind of dig into our discussion topics?
Sure, I'd love to. Let's jump in. So we've seen over the years that mobile has been growing, but that in-store typically for normal years is really remained consistent as a place to shop. Over 89% of people still go in-store to shop on a typical year, according to 2019 consensus data. But when we jump into this year, there's a couple things that are changing here. So in 2020, with the changing climate and this just unknown year that we're in right now, people are a little more hesitant to spend time in stores. 42% of those adults surveyed plan to spend less time actually in stores than they have in previous years, making mobile super important during this time period. For example, almost a third of adults say that are actually shopping more online this year, choosing to have items delivered to their home or picking them up via buy online, pick up in store, another big buzzword in the retail space, and curbside pickup this year. We're going to dive into a couple insights together. The first one is an idea of self-gifting, a term we've seen growing over the years, even before COVID came into play. The idea is that sometimes finding the perfect holiday gift isn't really about giving, it's more about receiving. So for the first insight that we'll dive into, we look back to the last recession of 2008, we'll see that people actually spent more time than they have in previous items we like to call affordable luxuries. So things like nail polish and sweet treats are things that actually saw a rise in 2008. The chairman of Estee Lauder actually coined this phrase as the lipstick effect, the theory that people are more likely to buy little luxuries in hard times that replace those larger items and indulgences that we see that are no longer possible. In 2019, almost 3 of the 5 people surveyed, about 59%, say that they actually are researching gifts for themselves across the holiday period. If you're anything like me, I actually do this all the time. You subconsciously look for yourself while you're shopping for others. There's another great insight to keep in mind when shaping messaging as well. And the last part of this is really that self-gifting during Black Friday and Cyber Monday sales. They're just as likely to buy for themselves and their homes even as they are for other people. So this holiday season, we expect a lot of shoppers to self-gift and even look at gifts a little bit differently than they have in the past. Jumping into the next insight, we'll see that discovery will prove to be even more important over this holiday period than ever before, as the imposed disruption is driven by COVID-19 pandemic means that people are more receptive to new products and services, which is a great thing for our brands. 1 in 3 people actually have used a new brand or product over the COVID-19 pandemic period. That's millions of people establishing new habits, and this new openness to products actually builds a new trend of what we're seeing during this holiday period. What this could look like, from 2017, we've seen year over year an increase in openness to trying new products, but 60% of people surveyed in 2019 were actually open to trying new products during the holiday and the rest of the year. That's almost double 2 years prior. So this is a huge opportunity to find a lot of new people and re-engage those new people you might have already found during the 2019 or 2020 season. Next, we'll jump into what these new audiences might look like. So these new audiences at lower cost will be key for Black Friday and Cyber Monday, as we expect the economic downturn will drive more shoppers to take advantage of deals and promotions this holiday season. Normally, Black Friday is very deal driven, but it's going to be even more so with the climate that we're in right now. About 71% of people say they will expect their finances to be negatively impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. And this may have already shifted their spending behaviors, as you might have seen for your own brands. When we look at this further, Q4 sales could be at any moment that person is just waiting for to finally buy that item. 48% of tech delayers and 44% of luxury delayers say they will now wait for promotions to buy. So if you combine that with a little luxury slide before, people are going to wait for those large ticket items till later in the year. Awesome. So we're going to jump in here to a couple different things and just call out a couple different moments that are really important for holiday. Holiday, as we like to say internally, starts on October 1. The reason being is that starting October 1, you'll see a lot of people start to build up large prospecting pools to drive even higher attention and retargeting of those customers at a lower price during the holiday moments in November specifically. I'd like to think of October 1 as that time where by October 1, what have you done to test and learn to make sure that your strategy is as sound as possible so that on October 1, you're setting and forgetting and leaving it run and letting your good work shine there. As you move into November, you'll see a couple more dates pop up here. This is a different year. We've got COVID-19 effects, and we also have effects from the election, which we're still trying to weigh out, and it'll be different than, of course, elections in the past just because of this one's new, and it's going to impact the auction differently. A good thing to keep in mind, though, as you're working in the beginning of November to continue building those prospecting audiences further, you really want to build up that pool so that by the time you get to whenever your promotions are, if you're having them, for Black Friday, Cyber Monday, you're not relying on finding all your new customers then, because it's typically more expensive to buy during peak areas of interest and intent. Another moment that you might not want to forget about, I like to say, be a part of moments that matter to your customers. If it matters to them, it's really relevant for you to be a part of that conversation, especially those micro moments that other brands might forget about. A great one is Singles Day outside the US, or more commonly known as Veterans Day within the US. Awesome. In December, I think of this kind of as, especially within retail, sometimes the month forgotten, huge opportunity to push messaging and awareness, especially with things that are happening in the news today where shipping might be impacted and we don't know when that last ship date might be. Really important to have those dates locked in and that you know when those are available for you all, so that you can really push messaging and urgency to buy before last ship date so that someone can have the item before their desired date of receiving it. Another thing to keep in mind too is that moment after the holiday, especially with other countries doing this very well with Boxing Day, but taking advantage of that momentum of I just bought stuff, I have stuff to return, and maybe I got a gift of some kind of money or a gift card that I can spend. A really good time where we've seen shopping behavior spike to take advantage of that and retarget those people that may have abandoned cart or could cross-sell another item in your catalog. And then last but not least is January. January, as I like to say, is one of the cheapest months to buy on our platform, and it's actually a month kind of forgotten because there's so much time and energy put into Q4, and it's so critical for businesses to get that right. And sometimes it takes a little bit longer to get planning for the next calendar year. Totally understandable. I would just make sure you don't forget about this opportunity to really drive messaging, especially with that new year, new me kind of style, new year, new house, whatever it might be. And then really diving into that momentum of building off of those great sales that you had at the end of the year.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. As I said, I did want to have kind of a discussion with you guys on some of the topics that are coming up for some of our brands too. I think the first thing that's really interesting, and you pointed it out, is just how early shopping is going to start this year. Over the last 6 months, pretty much since lockdown started, we've just seen shopping for gifting holidays start earlier and earlier. So for example, we started seeing people searching for Mother's Day gifts, over 2 weeks earlier this year than they did last year. So I can only expect that it's going to be even more pronounced for Q4. So, other than just considering starting your sales early, what should brands be doing in order to prepare? What would you say the best practices for them should be starting, September 1?
I love this question, and it's super important. When you think about this time right now, this is the money period where you can actually test and learn anything that you need to drive the best possible Q4 for your brand. What that looks like and what I would recommend is testing one or two things. I wouldn't put a ton of tests out there. I would definitely recommend using September as your really holy grail for testing. Once you get into November, you really don't want any kind of holdout or anything that would impact the performance of your ads, because that's where it's mission critical to drive revenue for the business. So definitely say pick one or two questions, really things that the business is eager to learn about and grow from, and then apply those learnings for the future so that you can continue building off of them as well.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And we've been talking to a lot of our brands about that, and also about how to make, obviously experiences really frictionless by doing a lot of that, even on-site testing now, to make sure your conversion rate kind of is as optimal as possible going into those holidays. The other thing that's been so concerning for a lot of our brands is that, in the past, so many companies and brands had such great kind of in-store experiences. You get to touch, feel the product, talk to people, etc. How are you recommending that brands kind of recreate this in-store experience, but digitally?
A great question. It's a really unique one. It's actually been very fun to watch how the creative minds have been able to use this. It's also hard because a lot of brands, understandably, are struggling with even getting photo shoots in action because it's really hard to get people together during this time. So there's been different ways I've approached this in the past. One really fun one that's a little bit more tech heavy, which is, I would say, is interesting for maybe later planning, but it's hard to get up and running right away, would be utilizing a messenger bot. There are great case studies on the platform, on the Facebook business website, that actually go into using a little bot to walk you through how a customer service person in store might actually walk you through the process of buying or helping you pick out an item. Very, very effective, and can be both brand and direct response driven to drive revenue. Other ways you can think about it, though, are simple things that maybe bring that level up. Are there certain selling propositions within store that really drive sales that you could bring in to your creative on your side? Are there different phrases? Are there different carousel images that you can pull in showing the detail of the product and what actually is that unique selling proposition that's coming in? Will really make you stand out, especially during holiday, from all the different 25% off promotions. It's really about like the quality and what you're bringing into this as a brand itself. Another fun one that I've seen work well is that if you can combine a couple of different things, so maybe you do have that curbside pickup opportunity, or you do have something they can play with in store where they can feel safe and feel comfortable, having that come in maybe in a carousel format or even an instant experience where you have that full screen opportunity to shop and look through is a great way to digitize a more print circular or feel a little bit more digital in the space. And you can bring in looks and feels and touches and maybe video components that show someone in store showing off an item that they would show you maybe when you come shopping.
Oh, that's a great idea. The other thing that I've been thinking a lot about, and maybe that's just because I'm thinking about what I'm going to get people for gifts, but is are there any, I guess, non-traditional categories that you're thinking are going to emerge this year, right? Like, are there things that people have picked up in quarantine that people will start gifting? And the other kind of thing around gifting that I've been thinking about and we've been discussing with our brands is, you're not going to be traveling as much, right? You might not be visiting with friends and family as much. So do you think people in their physical absence are going to be buying kind of bigger gifts because they do not have to travel and they don't have to, have that expense? Or is it more like out of sight, out of mind, and people are going to give smaller gifts, or if they're not physically there, they might not gift or give to that person? Where do you think people are going to land?
It's so interesting, and I'm, as a consumer, very interested to see what I do myself as well. I think it'll be a mix of like what the insights are saying. Like, I think it will be those affordable luxuries. If people have been unfortunately impacted economically by this, I think it will be more of those things. But I think also people are waiting to purchase those big ticket items on when it's going to drop. And we've seen this in years past too. Like, people keep waiting to think you have a better sale at the retailer. So that's been really interesting to watch. I mean, personally, I really want to buy things like a Peloton, so we'll see if that happens, but that's a big ticket item. So it'll be interesting to see what kind of different things emerge. I think that you will see different products than what you're used to kind of come into play, and that kind of fit into the lifestyle that we're all living if we work from home. So it'll just be interesting, honestly, to see. But I think kind of that mix of affordable luxuries, things like nail polish, and then there will be big ticket items that will still push through. It's just all about how you shape them and frame them and your messaging that'll really drive that consumer behavior. Things like free shipping, free returns, those are really hitting the market and working really well for any item, no matter what the price point is for the consumer.
Yeah, I think you're completely right. And now I'm thinking, I was like, do I self-gift the big items and then give the small luxuries, But I was just even thinking for brands as they're setting up their gift guides, it could make sense for them to have a couple of those different buckets, because you just don't know where people are, both within their own their own kind of life and their own kind of economic situation. So having those variable kind of buckets could be a really great idea.
Love that.
And then, you know, one of the last things, and this has been a really big topic of conversation for us and a lot of our brands, and I know you guys have been real big kind of proponents of this too, but, you know, customers and what we're seeing is consumers are more likely to support brands that have a mission that they care about, as well as brands that they feel are authentic. And I think it's even more pronounced now than it has been in the past. So, you know, and we think that's really important, but at the same time, this is Q4 and this is a time to drive sales. So how do you recommend that brands approach that messaging? You know, how do you walk the line between communicating the brand value and that authenticity, but then also getting somebody to kind of buy right now?
Definitely. I think it kind of comes down to those moments in the months breakdown as well. You can look at it a couple of different ways. I would first look at your months. October is a great time for prospecting, even beginning of November, great time to bring new people in, and especially with 1 in 3 people trying new products, a great time to show that brand proposition because people do want to buy a product that they connect with on that level. They're looking for a deeper connection. They're not just looking for a discount. They're looking for, do I resonate with this brand's values as well? When we also think about this though, when you think about the moments that matter, that critical week if you're having a sale or some kind of period during Black Friday to Cyber Monday, that's where I would say shifting that branding messaging away during that time is probably going to be your best bet. I would focus on things that are really going to drive the revenue. I always like to say even like dynamic ads are your best fuel. If you have those running, you can leverage your product catalog. It's very efficient in terms of showing the right product at the right time. Also efficient in terms of not shooting more creative at a very hard time to shoot creative. Those are going to be the bread and butter of really driving sales. That week period or whenever your sales really are, I would say you can definitely take time before to incorporate some of that branding video that really, or messaging, whatever it might be, a gift. That really is helpful, but then converting them as quickly as possible will be key as well afterwards. So definitely I would utilize that. If you want to use more of that messaging, if you did take time to build a video or if you did take time to build out more of a branded message, maybe adding the branded message on top of a instant experience unit with the products underneath could be a nice way to tie it in to drive more direct sales if you'd like to keep using that asset longer.
Okay, awesome. So that was all the discussion topics that we had, but we did have a couple questions, so I'm just going to get to those. So for traditionally non-promotional brands, are you still suggesting a heavier reliance on promo? So, you know, and I think this is a great one because we see a lot of brands that are they are very anti-promotion. That is not who they are. That is not what they want to be about. Do you still think a brand like that should maybe reconsider a heavier promotional strategy going into this Q4?
A great question. I'm all about a brand sticking to its values, but I do think there's something unique about this time of year and what that looks like. I have seen people do it extremely well just from a consumer standpoint where they might not be promotional. That is more than fine. But what you can do instead is maybe feature your best-selling products or even a new product that is dropping during this time. Anything that you can bring in that'll be a little bit more incentive. Even things like free shipping again and those free returns and the safety in stores. Those are all great things to highlight. You don't necessarily need a promotion to build some spice and energy around this time period by any means. It could be anything unique, but I definitely think that those could even work as well. And you definitely don't need huge promotions, but people will be looking for promotions. So just making sure that if you do have a promotion and it's your biggest one of the year, I would be as bold to call it out so that people know like this is the time to buy to really drive your sales forward and your KPIs for that specific sale internally.
Yeah, and we've seen some really amazing brands doing things who might not traditionally be promotional, but they might be partnering with a nonprofit, right? People are very cognizant at this time of year about giving back. So it might not be 25% off. It might be like for every purchase, we will donate X, right? And that might be a better message. And we've honestly seen it resonate extremely, extremely well when we've tested in the past. So it could be a way to be a little bit more unique, but still give that incentive, which, you know, kind of easier said than done, I'm sure. Another question, when do you recommend launching a gift guide? Is October 1st too early? But based on your calendar, I would say that would not be too early. That'd be like perfect. Do you think that's when you're going to start seeing most brands launch those gift guides, or do you think we might even see something earlier?
So typically in the past, we've seen about 33% of shopping start before November for holiday. The majority of it will take place during those big moments around November, but people are looking and building those ideas. I like to say personally, I like to get the idea in front of them before they even think they want it so that it's already on their wish list. So I don't think it's too early at all, especially I think this year with just the difference of InStore and what that could look like, and the potential of what e-commerce competition could be just in general could be really interesting to play with. So I would definitely say if you have it out there, if it's ready to go, if the items are ready to sell, I would have no problem launching it early, just to make sure that you guys have the advantage over competitors even too, to get your stuff out there in the first place and be that first thing on someone's list.
Yeah, and I don't know about you, but I frequently self-gift from gift guides. It'll be like perfect for whoever, and I'm like, I want that too.
Yeah.
And then we have one last question. So how do I make the case for additional investment this year? So, I think this is really important because a lot of our brands are kind of beholden to finance right now. That's just where we are. So how do you recommend brands kind of going to their CFO or their finance team and saying, I know we said we needed X, but actually, we didn't account for such a big e-commerce, Q4, we actually need to, increase spend by 30% or whatever it might be. Are there any kind of tips and tricks that you can give somebody who might be talking to finance to make the case for that additional investment?
There are a couple, and I will say I know it's always a hard thing to ask, and talking about finances are always like the thing in your closet that you don't want to bring out. So I understand it's a really hard thing, and it's especially this year. It's just been an interesting year as well. I will say the basic place I always like to start is looking back at performance last year, comparing that to what were you able to return, what return on investment were you able to achieve? Did that meet your KPIs? If not, what would you have needed an investment to potentially reach those like internal goals that you're looking for? And then I would say when you're looking at this year, I would just think about just the competition in the space that you've seen even from the beginning of this year, and then what vehicles you do have to run with. The nicest part about a lot of the units that Facebook has is that they're really driving that mobile first engagement that is driving e-commerce so heavily. So things like instant experience will load 5 times faster than any mobile unit or mobile website. Is really going to help drive those returns really quickly. One thing I will say is that when you're driving and asking for additional budget, I would definitely keep in mind that it does start to get more competitive as the time goes on for Q4. So just keep that in mind as well. And then take advantage of those moments and those calendars that I point out that a lot of people will kind of forget about. Maybe even the week after Cyber Monday as a huge time where you can retarget your audience and take advantage of that huge pool that you built up in those people that abandoned cart to drive even more sales before that holiday moment. And play with that and how you invest. If you're unable to get more investment, and I will definitely say this, I definitely think using what you know works best for your business. That's why testing in September is so important. Make sure that everything is clear and sound within your account. So by the time you get to the moments that you really need to turn on or heavy up investment more, you can really utilize that and really play to your best advantage without any like different tips or tricks. I would definitely say pouring into what you know works is going to be the thing that'll really drive e-commerce sales this year.
Yeah, and I mean, I think we all know how big e-com is going to be in Q4 this year and how big it's already been over the last 6 months as compared to 2019. So, use your agency too. Ask them for projections, ask them what they think will be able to kind of hit, because it's not just asking for additional investment and that's it. It's to drive business. It's to drive kind of like that revenue. So ask your agency, what do you think we can spend and what do you think we would get from that spend? And they'd be more than happy to obviously put that together for you, because everybody's kind of seeing the same thing. 2020 is nothing like 2019, especially right now. So what you don't want to do is underinvest and be left with kind of like, you don't want to leave money on the table. So I really love those tips that you had. Okay, so that's about it for us. So please stick around for our last session on conscious creative strategy and multicultural messaging for the season. Miranda, thank you so much for the time. We really appreciate all of the great insights and all of the great tips that you were able to provide today.
Thank you for having me.